Could the Dallas Cowboys sign Julio Jones or Will Fuller in free agency to solve their wide receiver need? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Cowboys. Locked On Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We want to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. I am Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. He is Landon McCool. Check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, how you doing today, sir?
Doing well. I feel a little bit left out because I don't have a Coke Zero take, which apparently
I just threw mine away, actually. I just finished
it's
it.
all the rage. Yeah, apparently everybody's been drinking Coke Zeros and no one told me about it. So, but I feel good. It's Friday. I'm excited to take a rare kind of questions Friday, which is nice. So it's a nice little double whammy of exciting news for us.
So we're going to get to your Twitter questions. But before we do that, I should address a tweet that I sent out today that people are shocked about. I don't know if you saw this, Landon.
Oh, no.
We were talking about the best short yardage running backs of all time on Twitter. Which, by the way, do you have a name that you want to mention? A lot of people like Marion Barber.
Honestly, Emmitt Smith was exceptional at it. Like, just because he understood how not to take on direct hits, and for a guy that was short and wide, was really good at kind of getting skinny and slick and has low center of gravity. So that was one of his very big superpowers. Was really good. John Allstott, the kid, that Mike guy Allstott, from Mike Allstott from the Tampa Bay Bucks. Who'd you say?
I said Zach Crockett of the Raiders, who was like a fullback / running back for them, who was really good. But I did this podcast with Elliot Harrison for the Power Rankings show, and he mentioned Marcus Allen. And I had to tell people on Twitter, I'm sure I told you this before, that Marcus Allen is actually who I was named after. And people started to put the connection together that I was named after a running back, which is why, and I saw several tweets out there. Yes, every villain has his origin story. So I get it now.
Oh my God. That's like huge breaking news on the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Wow. Marcus was named after that is
isn't that sad?
It actually origin story.
Even Marcus Allen kind of played a little bit of fullback early on in his career. So I was named after a hybrid running back fullback. So.
Wow. I mean, all you needed is to fall into a tank of radioactive material, and you've got yourself a full-fledged origin story, buddy. Congratulations.
My dad was a big Marcus Allen fan.
Your dad thought that running backs mattered, apparently.
He did. He tried to warn me against making this my brand a long time ago. It didn't really work, but
it didn't take.
Oh, well. All right, let's get to your guys' Twitter questions. And the first question comes from Will. He wants to know, would you guys rather sign Will Fuller or Julio Jones for the first 4 to 6 games of the season until Michael Gallup comes back? Now, we did hear Stephen Jones a few weeks ago say that the Cowboys will be active in free agency post-draft. It's post-draft now. There are a lot of receivers available, including Odell, Julio, Will Fuller. Do any of these guys interest you as kind of a short-term solution for the Cowboys?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think if you're looking at signing a guy to come in and kind of just help you ease into the season while you're waiting for Gallup to get healthy, you're waiting for Tolbert to kind of get up to speed. We've talked about it before. I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think, all those names you mentioned make a lot of sense. I mean, maybe not Odell Beckham Jr., because I feel like he'll likely want something more than kind of just a prove it deal or a 1 year.
And he's coming
deal,
off an injury as well, right? He kind of, you need
to
see a guy that
there.
can play right away, right? Not Odell, who you're waiting on. Right.
Yeah, I mean, the whole point is that you're waiting on Gallup and Tolbert, so why would you sign Odell to wait on him as well? I think that it's Fuller, it's Jones. I think Fuller makes a lot of sense simply in the sense that, he's got a speed element you're looking for. The issue with him is the ticking time clock. Like, how long could he be on the field and be active before he's going to get injured again, or there's going to be some kind of problem? I think that you could sign him, hope to, kind of just keep him in bubble wrap for a little while, and then roll him out there for week 1, week 2, week 3, see what you get. Hopefully by then Gallup's come back. And then, you could really kind of greatly reduce his snap count and kind of use him in specific situations, and he gives an element to your team that you might not have otherwise. I think with Julio Jones, I mean, obviously Julio Jones is a Hall of Famer, an elite wide receiver at different points of his career, an MVP candidate at the wide receiver position at different points. He's clearly slowed down a little bit, and where his game is right now, it's not terribly different than I think what you already have in some ways, except less dynamic, right? So I think that Fuller makes a little bit more sense just because and it adds an extra element in there. And then even after you may not need to use him as much because people are getting healthy, he still could be on the roster as another dimension to your offense. Yeah, that would be really, really valuable to have. So I would say Fuller makes a little more sense than Julio Jones, but I think that both, if they're healthy, makes sense as kind of a stopgap early season kind of situation.
Yeah, I agree. I think Will Fuller's the guy that I'm most interested in, partly because I think the price is going to be pretty cheap. I think he gives you something the rest of the offense doesn't have. And actually, I went back and looked at like the injury history over the last couple of years. It's not as bad as you would think. So in 2020, he played 11 games, and then he got suspended at the end of the season for 6 games because of, I believe it was PEDs, okay? So he didn't miss any time that season due to injuries, which is great. He had a 1-game suspension, following starting in the 2021 season, which he served. And then in week 4, he broke his finger and it put him on the IR for the rest of the season. That kind of stuff happens, right? It's not a soft tissue thing where he's constantly dealing with hamstrings. His last knee injury was in 2018 is when he tore his ACL. So he's well kind of beyond that. I don't know. He's going to miss time. Like I've got no doubts about that, but I don't think he's so injured that he can't provide value early in the season.
I don't want to speculate on stuff like this because I hate it, but I do think that there is also kind of a locker room issue with him at times. And, so I think that there is some other stuff there, but again, like there's not a reason that you can't work around that. You're not relying on this guy to be a huge component of your offense. He's basically a stopgap for some other guys. And then, if things work out and everything's cool, then, he could be useful later on in the season as well. So,
I'm just curious
why these guys are on the market, right?
Yeah, and I'm curious when a signing like this would happen. Like, do you need to sign Will Fuller now, or do you wait until you get to training camp and you kind of see what the rest of your receivers like, or are you worried that somebody else is going to scoop him up? I don't know, but I do think Fuller is a guy that would make a lot of sense for the Cowboys for the first. Let's say you just need him for 4 weeks, the first month of the season. I think he would fit pretty well.
I think, with this sort of situation, the fandom is incredibly impatient here because they just see that the guy's available. We need to get him before he's not available. And that's the kind of push here. I think for the teams themselves, they have an idea what's going on with these players. I think if they're interested in them, they're in contact with their agents. They have an idea usually what the market is, what their interest is. Some of these guys may not be interested in signing deals until training camp or beyond because they don't want to deal with OTAs or.
I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case for both these guys. From kind of rumblings over the last couple of years, I don't know if Julio and Will Fuller love practice.
I mean, yeah, again, there's a reason why, and listen, we had one of those wide receivers recently who didn't love practice. And I think, there's a reason why these guys are still on the market. And it's not only because of, team interest. I think the teams are interested. I think that there are specifics here. And I will add in this other thing too. I don't think the Cowboys necessarily want or need these guys in training camp, right? Like they want to see what these young receivers can do. They want to give those young receivers.
They want Tolbert to take as many snaps as possible, right?
Yeah, I mean, Fuller and especially Julio Jones, they don't need training camp snaps to go out there and play week 1. You get them ready 2 weeks before the week 1. You get them practicing; they'll be ready for week 1 to play. These rookies need these snaps. And that's why signing these guys so that you can have them show up at the mini camp. it just doesn't make a ton of sense for the Cowboys because they want to give every single one of those reps to the young guys so they can see if they can improve to the point where they don't need Will Fuller or they don't need Julio Jones. Because if Tolbert really, has an accelerated learning curve and looks great, you may not need to sign those guys.
Yeah, it's possible. And these guys, because they're veterans too, the vet minimum's higher. You might not want to guarantee their salary. So this wouldn't even be shocked if this is one or two of these guys are available after week one and you're kind of signing them week by week. We'll see. All right, let's take a quick break so we can tell you guys about BetOnline. Our partners at BetOnline continue to be the number one source for all of your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, fights, and even next season's NFL futures. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering needs, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Landon, next question. This one from Zach. Which position group are you the most worried about going into training camp?
The most worried about. Do you have one in particular?
Yeah, for me, it's linebacker. It's like because there's just not a lot of depth there. We don't know what's the status of Jabril Cox, how healthy he is. Leighton Vander Esch played almost every game last year. He might even played all of them, but he is still a high-risk player to get injured, right, and to miss time. If something were to happen to Vander Esch, and let's even just say it's a somewhat minor injury, and he misses the first 4 games of the season or something like that, they just don't have a lot of linebacker depth. They've got guys that they like, down roster that maybe long-term could give you some hope. But I'm not sure they've got more than one starting linebacker outside of Micah Parsons and Vander Esch on this team.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of this, like you mentioned, is that we don't really know what Cox's status is right now, where he is on some of this. Gifford is obviously the guy that they would be relying on, I think, and that's not something you want to do for a long-term basis. Yeah. Linebacker is also a position that if you needed to, you could sign a guy off the street and probably bring him in and get decent play from here if you had to. But I agree, as far as where the roster stands right now, linebacker does seem to be the one that, if we were playing games right now and there was an injury, that would be a problem. I think another position is just because we haven't seen it yet, I have a lot of questions about the offensive line. I just would like to see kind of how they are all performing. I think that the group that they've got will work is good. But it would be nice to it will be nice when we kind of can see them all perform together and see exactly what you have in Tyler Smith. There's just a lot of unknown there.
All right. This next question kind of ties right into that. This one from Jesus. He wants to know what happens if Tyler Smith can't beat out Connor McGovern at left guard to start the season.
Tyler Smith becomes the backup left tackle. I think
that would be a bad situation if you spend a first round pick on a guy that can't crack your starting lineup.
I don't know that it's the end of the world. You don't lose touchdowns because of it. Like it's not ideal, but I mean,
not a good sign of where your first round pick is at.
Unless it's a really good sign of where your third round pick is at. Like I think it depends on the situation. Okay, is Tyler Smith a disaster and like he's not doing well, or are they both? Point. Are they both playing well, and suddenly Connor McGovern is playing up to his original billing, and all right, I guess the question is, let's put it this way: let's say they drafted Tyler Smith and Connor Williams was still here, right? And Tyler Smith was having a hard time beating out Connor Williams initially out of training camp. Would you set off fire alarms at that point?
No, that wouldn't be surprising.
Okay, now second part of that, if Connor McGovern took another year of development and was as good as Connor Williams at left guard, let's say, would that surprise you?
A little bit, but I see what you're getting at. Now, let me ask you this, though. Because of the contract situation, right, where you have 5 years of control under Tyler Smith or 1 year of control under Connor McGovern, you would think that the Cowboys are going to opt to play Smith, considering they have more draft capital invested in him and they've got a longer contract. So how much better would Connor McGovern need to be in training camp and in the preseason at left guard than Tyler Smith to earn that left guard, that starting left guard spot? Because if they're equal, they're going to play Smith, right?
If it's the case that they're both playing well and there's a competitive situation, then I would say that McGovern needed to be pretty significantly better than Tyler Smith. If there's a case that one of them, like specifically Tyler Smith, is struggling to the point where like they can't even put him on the field,
it's going to affect your offense.
Yeah. So I guess if the question is, if Tyler Smith is very bad, is that bad? The answer is yes, that is very bad. I mean, but Connor McGovern beating Tyler Smith out, I mean, that may not necessarily be a bad thing. If suddenly Connor McGovern, spent the offseason becoming a nail eater and is like an all-pro left guard suddenly. So
I just don't know how realistic that is,
Yeah. Oh no, certainly. I mean, I think we're banting about hypotheticals here. So I mean, I don't know how realistic it is that Tyler Smith is so bad that he can't crack the starting lineup.
Yeah. All right, next question from Robbie. He wants to know, and this is how I know fantasy football season is getting close, because a lot of people want to know how many touches are Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard going to get. But they want to know, how do you think the Cowboys will handle the backfield touches? Many are starting to think that it will split closer to 50-50, while others have pointed out that Zeke's knee was the reason for the snap reduction. How do you think it's going to go?
Well, I think the carries are probably, going to be close to what they were last year, maybe closer to 50-50. But I think that the difference will be the uptick in touches for Pollard.
I would think so.
Specifically. Yeah, I don't know that like you're talking about necessarily reducing a bunch of Zeke's touches to give to Pollard as much as taking some of Cooper's touches and giving them to Pollard and taking, some touches here and there. I think they want to get Pollard more involved in the offense, but I don't know that always has to be at the expense of Zeke. That may be a reduction in snaps for Zeke, but I think that I do think that they are in the market to try to give Pollard a lot more touches. I just think it's going to be a lot more in the passing game.
Yeah, I still think Zeke is probably good for 275 touches this year, around that mark, I bet. And I bet Pollard's at, I don't know, what do you think? 125 carries, maybe 40 to 50 receptions?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Maybe Pollard gets more touches than that. I mean, more carries than that.
I think Pollard probably gets more carries, like probably closer to 150. I think that if you look at like,
so Pollard got 130 last year.
Yeah. So
but he was banged up a little bit at the end of the season with the plantar fascia. I think 150 to 175 feels about right for him.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that makes sense too. I would go with that. And again, an uptick in the receptions, 40 to 50 touches receptions, that's a lot. So
the Cowboys
which is good.
Yeah, which is good. The Cowboys have scaled back Zeke's touches over the last 4 years. 2018, 381, 2019, 355, 2020, 296, 2021, 284. I really think that the number that the Cowboys probably should be aiming for is 250, right? Like, let's try to keep them around that amount.
Yeah, because, I mean, despite, some of the poo-pooing by some folks that, are named after running backs, ironically, at times when he was healthy, like he looked good last year when he was carrying the ball. It was after the PCL and they kept forcing him into the lineup that he really started to fall off the cliff, and that you felt like there was a resurgence to a certain point with Zeke, and then he gets a PCL injury, and then it just kind of falls off. So that's why I don't, like the talk about him hitting 22 miles per hour on the GPS, and then in some of the videos we're seeing, I don't, I believe that stuff, because what we saw from him early in the season was a very kind of thinner, quicker, more refreshed Zeke, more explosive Zeke. And then as the PCL injury happened, as some other stuff happened, that kind of went away. So maybe the idea is less touches, kind of keep both of these guys fresh. And I think we should also add in, they like Rico Dowdle a lot. He's going to be on the roster, I think, because he's going to play a lot of special teams if he comes back healthy and plays well. I wouldn't be surprised if they wouldn't throw him in to get a couple of carries here just to kind of keep those other two guys fresh as well.
So Ezekiel Elliott, in the first 8 games of the season, when he played well, he almost averaged 5 yards a carry in the first 2 months of the season. He was averaging 16 carries a game and 2.9 receptions. So, 19 touches. I think that's about right. I'd maybe even go a
Yeah.
little bit lower. I mean, you're talking about 1 or 2 touches a game. It's not a big deal. But I think between 17 and 19 touches is probably the right amount. And then you have Tony Pollard touch the ball 12 to 14 times, and you can do that with 8 carries, 4 receptions, 2 kick returns. Like, I think that feels about right.
And we got to remember, guys, like, this is not how teams look at distributing the ball. Like, I mean, they want a range, right? But they're not
Right.
like Zeke's
Once you hit 19, you're done, right?
Yeah, don't look Zeke's way in the route progression because he's reached to his max touches. Like it's the game flow obviously dictates a lot of this, but I do think that they kind of have a general idea of the number of general touches they would like to get each one of these.
I just would like to see the Cowboys monitor this a little bit, right? Like,
I think that they are. I think that is one thing that we could say that Mike McCarthy has done a lot better job than I think players and the other people have in the past. You can say a lot of things about Mike McCarthy, but I think that by the end of the season, he had the team healthy and ready to play into the playoffs. Like I think they did a very good job as a team of kind of regulating the group, making sure the touches were right, making sure that everyone was healthy for the point of the season that they really needed to be. It was just, unfortunately, didn't work out the way they wanted.
Yeah, I just don't think we need to see the 25, 27 touch games anymore from Ezekiel Elliott because, number one, it's not good for him by the end of the season. And number two, you've got somebody else in your team that's just as good, if not better. And I just said that. You want to make sure that the touches are somewhat evenly distributed. So we'll see. We'll see how the Cowboys decide to use their running backs this season. All right, let's take one more quick break to tell you guys about Built Bar and their brand new product, Brownie Batter Puffs. I love brownies, but you know what I love more? Brownie batter. My wife makes really, really good brownies, and I'm still a little bit of a kid. She'll let me, take the little spatula and clean it off, right? But if you like brownies and brownie batter as much as I do, you're in luck because Built Bar has a brand new product with Brownie Batter Puffs. 140 calories, 17 grams of protein, and only 7 grams of sugar. Brownie Batter Puffs are the perfect pick-me-up for any single day. Plus, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. And Landon, I don't know if you knew this, but you're getting a brand new pack of Brownie Batter Puffs, I believe, this weekend. Because mine just came
excited.
in today.
I'm excited for that. I haven't gotten them yet. I'm excited.
Yeah, it's a really good time. Go to built.com and use promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your next order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, last one. Alex wants to know, there's a reported contract offer out there for Dalton Schultz, the Cowboys tight end. How much money do you think it's for, and what would be the ideal price here? So I don't want to necessarily talk about guarantees and years and that stuff, but like around how much per year would you be comfortable paying Dalton Schultz?
Well, I might need some assistance here. What's the current tag?
Yeah, I got you.
It's 11 million.
It's 10.9 million. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that's your starting.
Yes.
Your starting kind of salvo, right? So I think,
and I can give you some other contracts just to.
Yeah, please.
The highest one right now is George Kittle, $15 million a year. Travis Kelce, $14 million a year. Mark Andrews just signed a deal that was $14 million a year. Last year, Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith basically signed the exact same deal, $12.5 million a year. That's kind of
perfect. Yeah, so 13 million is exactly what we need to pay, right? Like, I feel like he's better and more reliable than Jonnu Smith and those guys. Like, I think he's not quite at the Mark Andrews.
I agree.
Level. So I'll fit you right in there at 13 million would be great. That's 2 million more than what you're making off of the salary cap. I think he's a high-end, versatile two-way tight end. I don't think he's the elite guy, but I think he's a guy that you can win with for sure. He's not going to be the focus of your offense, but you'd rather have him than not have him next year, at least as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
So that's where I would probably say.
The tight end market is so weird though, because
it really is.
How are George Kittle and Travis Kelce making $14 and $15 million a year, but the wide receivers are making 27? Those guys are just as good, if not better. And then the other tight ends last year that signed contracts, and even this year, Logan Thomas signed a deal that paid him $8 million a year. Will Dissly paid a deal that was $8 million a year. Darren Waller, $7.5 million. Tyler Conklin, $6 million. Austin Hooper, $6 million. Ian Thomas, $5.5 million. Logan Thomas, $5.5 million. Like, I don't know. It's so weird to me why these tight ends are so underpaid.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has to do with the versatility in which they're used, by teams. I think teams specifically, use tight ends very differently, and because of that they value them very differently. So the market isn't quite as strong for tight ends because there's just not a lot of teams. There's not as many teams that are vying for those kind of services the way that there are for wide receivers. Every team needs a top end wide receiver. Like there's no offense really that doesn't feature a wide receiver that is somehow at least trying to provide for the rest of your wide receiver core. With tight ends, it's like there are definitely teams that don't use a lot of tight ends or that when they do, they use them for blocking mostly. And so they just don't value the position and the versatility there. They can get someone who can do one or the other of blocking and receiving and pay them, half the cost of some of these top end guys. So that's why I think the tight end market is kind of all over the place. And then I think beyond that too, it's weird. The other side of it too is that it's difficult to develop tight ends. Yeah. So it's like, and you really only need one big money tight end on your team. Like, in fact, most teams don't even necessarily need that one. You could have multiple big money wide receivers on your team. And that's something that again is just going to increase the market for wide receivers overall.
So if I gave you like 4 years, $52 million. So that's an average of $13 million. And maybe there's some incentives in there. So that's really like $12 million a year. Sounds good to you?
Yeah, I think it does. Because
$30-ish million guaranteed.
The Cowboys, use the tight end position so much. It's such a part of their offense. I think that those numbers are reasonable for a guy that is one of the tops in the league. I mean, not top 3, but top 7. Right?
Yeah, and I think he's 26 now, so that you'd pay him basically through his age 29 season, 26, 27. Yeah, through the age 29 season, and hopefully by that point, either Jake Ferguson has developed, Sean McEwen becomes the next Gronkowski, something like that, right?
Yeah, Sean McEwen becomes the next one. Give me a break. I'm looking around for a hammer to hit myself in the head.
Well, I just say, don't be shocked if Sean McEwen turns out to be good.
You should be shocked if Sean McEwen turns into Travis Kelce or Gronkowski.
I heard Travis Kelce say he models his game after Sean McEwen. So
I think that you need to lay off the Coke Zero. I think that you hope that his game is going to age well. So that's the thing. I think it will, and I think tight ends usually do, and I think the way he plays especially will. So I think you're going to get good value on a contract like that, and you'll get all the value out of it. And then decide at 29, do you want to re-sign him, or do you want to see where Ferguson is, or can we stop the McEwen train from rolling over the rest of the depth chart at tight end?
We'll see it, but I think that's a good strategy. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the deal that the Cowboys have on the table, and maybe it's even a little bit less, and they're willing to wiggle around a little bit there. But that's kind of where I assume the Cowboys are looking at. So, all right, that is it for today's show. Thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every day. Now make Locked On NFL your second listen. The schedule may be dark, but the NFL never stops, and neither does Locked On NFL. Get insights and opinions from hosts including Ross Jackson, Chris Carter, and Tony Wiggins, plus local Locked On NFL hosts repping all 32 squads. There's no offseason for real fans, so make sure you subscribe to Locked On NFL and on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you check us out on YouTube at Locked On Cowboys. Follow us on Twitter, again, at Locked On Cowboys over there. You can follow Landon at McCool BCB. I am at Marcus _Mosher. We'll see you guys next time. Go enjoy some Coke Zero, everybody.